So far we've talked about computers and software, we've talked about methods, and we've talked about questions. The last set of tools are non-physical, similar to questions. We're going to look at theory. What do theories do for social scientists? Well, here's the answer. Theories simplify reality. They help organize our thinking. If a sociologist is interested in studying alcoholism, they could interview 500 alcoholics. Now, a bad idea would be to interview 500 alcoholics. You'd have 1,000 hours worth of data. You could just transcribe everything that came out in the interview, publish it, and say, that's my research. The problem is, you didn't do any thinking. You asked questions, and people answered them, and that was it. In order to use that interview, what you need to do is read every single thing that your interviewees said. Learn about alcoholism, but you use theory to help organize your own thinking, simplify everything you learned, and explain it to others. Instead of giving 5,000 hours worth of data, you need a parsimonious answer. You sort of summarize and synthesize and put everything together into a theory. So let's say we interviewed 500 alcoholics. Well, is it possible for us to develop a theory that explains that there's 5 pathways to alcoholism or 3 pathways to alcoholism? And when you look at your data, you say, I interviewed 500 people, and even though I had 500 people, there was only 5 pathways. People like Ed went towards this pathway, people like Mary went towards this pathway, and you could talk about those paths or trajectories towards alcoholism. What you're doing is simplifying reality, you're organizing your reader's thoughts, and you're offering a parsimonious answer. That's what theories do for social scientists. And all types of scientists use theory. If a physicist is going to do physics, they can't look at every single variable, and they can't let every variable vary. They have to isolate one variable, hold everything else constant, simplify reality, and focus on that one variable in that controlled environment. Psychologists do that as well. We're using our control of environments to simplify reality, organize, and give efficient solutions. The analogy is just driving around aimlessly. If I say you're not allowed to use a map, you're not allowed to use a compass, and if I could figure out a way to hide the street signs from you, and I say, drive to Omaha, Nebraska. Well, you could drive around aimlessly, but maps make our life easier, just like theory does as well. Theory helps us organize our thoughts. Maps are a simplification of reality. Maps don't tell you about every tree and every bush and every traffic jam. They don't tell you about every mountain or whether there's a restaurant here or whether there's a restaurant there. Maps organize our thinking. They tell us to focus on the roads, focus on north, south, east, and west. Theory does the same thing for a social scientist. Organizes and simplifies. There are 2 parts to theory. There are the causal relations. These are all observable. You use empirical questions. You report what you see. I observe that men, that's an observable thing, men versus women. Men make more money than women. So you've got something you could observe. Is the person a man? Is the person a woman? And then you've got something you can observe. How much money do they make? The men are making $1. Women are making 75 cents. That's an observable phenomenon. It's a pattern. Men make more money than women. Now we can start to think about causal mechanisms, the invisible forces that produce this, the process by which men make more money than women. So that's a theoretical question. We have to infer causality. This goes hand in hand what I just spoke about with regard to empirical questions and theoretical questions. You use both. Here are a few examples of causal mechanisms in physics: magnetism, gravity, electricity. We can't really see gravity. We can throw something in the air, that's observable. We see it fall, that's observable. We name the causal mechanism gravity. Same thing with a magnet. I can take a magnet and pull a piece of metal across the desk. We see the metal moving. We see the magnet moving. Those are two observable things. Metal moves, magnet moves. The mechanism causing the metal to move we refer to as magnetism. Within the social sciences, we're going to talk about mechanisms like love and loyalty. And love and loyalty are very similar to magnetism and gravity. This is the model that we'll be using this semester for the first unit of our course. We're going to examine how social context shapes our motives, how social context shapes our internal states, how our motives impact our behavior, our action, and how when many individuals take action, it transforms into a collective outcome. The example I always give in class is if we're all sitting in a classroom and suddenly lightning strikes the side of our building, there's a loud bang from the lightning, our ears start beeping, beep. There's smoke, there's fire, people are screaming. That's the context. How is that going to shape your internal state? Now, a lot of people want to jump from context immediately to action. They said, you just described the context, I would run out of the room. And what I say is, that's individual action. You just skipped your motive. You skipped your internal state, and that's important. We got to focus on internal state. So if the context is lightning strikes, you got the beeping noise, you got fire, you got smoke, you got screaming voices, well, the internal state of people would probably be something like shock, fear, confusion. Those are all motives or internal states. They're what's going on inside your head. Now, I want to point out, we can't see inside your head. We can't see in there. That's why we call it an internal state. So context shape what's going on inside your head. What goes on inside your head shapes what physical observation behavior you do. Let me state that again. What's going on inside your head shapes what observable behavior you do. If you're scared, you might scream. If you're in shock, you might grab the table and be unable to move. If you are confused, you might, again, not move. If you are feeling threatened or worried, maybe you'll get up and try to help other people. Those are behaviors. Being worried is an internal state. Being confused is an internal state. Being scared is an internal state. We can call them an internal state or a motive. And when all of our individual actions come together, it transforms into chaos or order. It's possible that with internal states like fear and confusion and shock, that when certain people start behaving, it comes together where people get trampled, people get hurt, and the collective outcome is chaos and injury. The big thing I want to emphasize here is that many of us want to focus on individual action. We want to focus on what people are doing, rather than looking at how context shapes motives. Sociologists really want to focus on context, because what's going on in our environment shapes what we think, what we feel, our orientation towards others, our orientation towards ourselves, our orientation towards objects, and then that internal state is going to shape our behavior. So if you find yourself focusing on action and behavior, take 2 steps back. If you find yourself focusing on context and behavior, make sure you recognize that people are motivated and people have internal states. We've got a few formal definitions for you. We refer to the situational mechanism, which is how context causes internal states. Sociologists try to theorize what particular context shapes which internal states. We're going to talk about the context for sympathy, the context for hatred, the context that creates self-interest, the context that creates habit. We also look at behavioral mechanisms, which is how if you have a certain internal state, it's going to shape certain actions. When you're sad, there's certain behaviors that are likely. When you're scared, there's certain behaviors that are likely. And we're going to examine that behavioral mechanism. And the last one is the transformational mechanism. When many individuals react, have a certain internal state, and then take action, how do those individuals aggregate or combine into a collective outcome? If you don't understand this at the moment, that's okay. It's our first day of class. We'll get there. But this is what we're going to be looking at for the next 5 weeks. Here is a quote from our supplemental textbook. Theories tell us how higher order phenomena, or context, affect individual units, why individual units act in particular ways, and how individual actions combine to produce new higher order outcomes, or context. The idea here is that context impacts individuals, individuals impact each other, and then that recreates a new context.